Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Charles, and you're watching Crime Time. Now, today's story is about last mail request of death row inmates, and this is Vice. So, we're gonna watch this and tell me about it in the comment section down below.
Air. It's more than a word. It's the heart of our mission and purpose. For more than 12.
Today we're reading The Last Meal, which impressed me with its simple idea, executed really well. It elicits that morbid curiosity that we have for the dark fringes of society. It's hard to imagine having much of an appetite the day before your scheduled death. Stick around after and we'll talk to the filmmakers.
Food porn and true crime, so if you can combine them, you can definitely draw people in.
Directed by Marcus McKenzie and Daniel Principe, here is The Last Meal.
Use a whole entrepreneur and he's got them.
Oh, okay. Gotta go back. Gotta go back. John Spinkling, capital punishment. Them. This was his last words before he was executed. Them without the capital get the punishment. Executed by electric chair in Florida on May 25th, 1979. Woo! That was a long time. Long time ago. 1979. James Paul Cooler. I appreciate the hostility that you guys have shown me. And the respect in the last meal was really good. That is about it. Executed by lethal injection in Texas on December 11th, 2002. George Bernard Harris. Somebody needs to kill my triathlete. Executed by lethal injection in Missouri on September 13th, 2000.
In the early hours of May 10, 1994, John Wayne Gacy, convicted of the sex-related killings of 33 young men and boys, was put to death by lethal injection. The previous day, he had been allowed to entertain friends and family in a private picnic on prison grounds. For his last meal, he requested a dozen deep-fried shrimp, a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken, French fries, a pound of strawberries, and a bottle of Diet Coke. Gacy showed no remorse for his crimes. He wrote in his final statement that killing him would not compensate for the loss of others.
That's weird. Kiss my ass. That's what I'm going to do.
On April 19,
Okay.
1995,
That's
Timothy
weird.
McVeigh drove a rental truck packed with 5,000 pounds of explosives up to the front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. A fuse was lit, and at 9:02 a violent explosion decimated the building. It was the
I had to
deadliest
pause
act
for a
of
second.
domestic
I don't know how executioners can watch somebody be executed to death. I would have anxiety, panic attack, all that. I couldn't sleep at night after that.
terrorism the United
Executing
States had
dozen
ever seen.
people. Hell no,
McVeigh
I
chose
swear.
the 2-year anniversary of the Waco
That's
siege
traumatizing.
to stage
I
his
just wanted
rebellion
to die.
against what he saw
Dude.
as the federal government's misuse of power.
The thing that hits me the hardest about that is the CS gas. Just knowing what it does.
That's a
knowing
hard
that some
drive, bro.
adults can barely breathe because of it. When I saw it introduced into a building full of kids like that, it just
168 people were killed during the Oklahoma City bombing, including 19 children.
Sentenced to death, McVeigh's last meal request was clinically simple: 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream.
Raised my credit score by 12 points instantly, which is insane.
So I raised my
Adolf Eichmann, one of the major coordinators of the Holocaust, was tasked with gathering information on Jews, seizing their property, and transporting them to ghettos and extermination camps. Some 6 million Jews were systematically murdered by Nazi Germany between 1941 and 1945. In what Hannah Arendt famously described as the banality of evil, when confronted with the unspeakable magnitude of his crimes, Eichmann claimed he was not an anti-Semite, but merely an obedient bureaucrat who carried out his duties. For his last meal, Eichmann requested a bottle of caramel and Israeli red wine with the usual prison food of cheese, bread, olives, and tea. He drank half the bottle before he was hanged. On January 24th, 1989, Theodore Robert Bundy was strapped into a wooden chair before 2,000 volts of electricity was sent racing through his body. Perhaps the most infamous of serial killers, he kidnapped, raped, and murdered at least 30 young women and girls. Bundy declined his special last meal. He was served the same meal as the other prisoners that day: steak, eggs, hash browns, toast, coffee, juice, butter, and jelly.
your wife and kids.
Eileen Warnos, convicted of the murders of 6 men, also declined a special meal. During the hours before her execution, she ate a hamburger and other snack food from the prison's canteen, and later requested a cup of black coffee. Warnos' childhood was marked by horrific violence, poverty, and sexual abuse. David Castillo, executed in 1998 for stabbing a liquor store clerk, requested a Mexican feast for his final meal: 24 tacos, 2 cheeseburgers, 2 whole onions, 5 jalapeno peppers, 6 enchiladas, 6 tostadas, 1 quart of milk, and 1 chocolate milkshake. What Castillo actually received was 4 tacos, 2 onions, 5 jalapenos, 6 enchiladas, 2 tostadas, 1 quart of milk, and a chocolate milkshake. Still impressive, but 2 cheeseburgers and 20 tacos shy of the meal he ordered. Last meal requests are reported by the media exactly as the state receives them, leading many to assume the prisoner is served what they ordered. This isn't always the case. In 1990, when James Edward Smith requested a lump of dirt as his last meal, he was instead given yogurt, as dirt was not on the prison's approved food list. Lawrence Russell Brewer was a white supremacist. On June 7, 1998, in Jasper County, Texas, James Byrd Jr. accepted a ride home for Brewer and 2 of his friends. The 3 men took Byrd to a remote road out of town, beat him, spray-painted his face, urinated and defecated on him, then chained his ankles to the pickup truck and dragged his body along an asphalt road for 3 miles. For his last meal, Brewer ordered 2 chicken fried steaks smothered in gravy with sliced onions, a slab of peanut butter fudge with crushed peanuts, a cheese omelet with ground beef, tomatoes, onions, bell peppers, and jalapenos, 1 pint of Bluebell vanilla ice cream, 1 pound of barbecue with half a loaf of white bread, a large bowl of fried okra with ketchup, 3 fajitas, a meat lover's pizza, 3 root beers, and a triple meat bacon cheeseburger with fixings on the side. Whatever meal Brewer actually received, he didn't eat a bite of it, stating simply he was not hungry. The state of Texas immediately stopped granting special meals.
We're Visible, the wireless company that makes things visible. Switch and get a one-line plan with unlimited data. Now just...
Ironically, Brewer robbed his accomplice John King of his own last meal request. The state that executed the most people and served its last meal. It is common for death row inmates to not eat their final meal due to a loss of appetite. Many inmates had told officials they were not hungry in the 24 hours before their scheduled deaths. Someone who was hungry was Francois Mitterrand, the longest-serving president in the history of France. He had abolished the death penalty in 1981. Dying of prostate cancer, Mitterrand requested as part of his last meal an ortolan, an endangered songbird which are illegal to kill and eat. The ortolan is caught in netting and kept in a covered box. The bird gorges itself on seed until it is 4 times its normal size. It is then drowned in Armagnac brandy, plucked and roasted. Mitterrand consumed the bird whole, draped beneath a large white cloth, so that God himself could not witness the obscene act. Ricky Ray Rector shot police officer Robert Martin before turning the gun on himself. Rector's suicide attempt failed, rendering him effectively lobotomized. Despite this, he was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. Bill Clinton, in the middle of a 1992 presidential campaign mired in controversy over his alleged affair with Jennifer Flowers, was fighting for his political life. He flew back to his home state to personally oversee Rector's execution. According to opinion polls, the Flowers sex scandal had cost the governor 12 points.
She's a legend and is described in some detail in a supermarket tabloid, which she calls a 12-year affair with you.
That allegation is false.
For his last meal, Rector requested steak, fried chicken, cherry Kool-Aid, and a pecan pie. Barely cognitive and unable to comprehend his impending death, Rector did not touch the pecan pie, saving it for later. A young black man, Dobie Gillis Williams, was convicted of the murder of Sonia Nippers, a white housewife in Louisiana. 3 police officers testified that Dobie confessed on a tape recording. Soon after, it was discovered the recorder had not been used properly and no recording had been made. Despite appeals, Williams was executed by lethal injection. He had an IQ of 65 and was intellectually disabled. Dobie's last meal was 12 candy bars and some ice cream. Gary Gilmore was executed by firing squad in 1977. He became the first person in nearly 10 years to be executed in the United States following the reinstatement of the death penalty. His life and crimes were immortalized in the made-for-television film The Executioner's Son, where he was portrayed by Texan actor Tommy Lee Jones. Gilmore was served a last meal of steak, potatoes, milk, and coffee. An uncle smuggled 3 miniature bottles of whiskey into the prison before the execution. Gilmore finished all 3. When he was asked if he had any last words, Gilmore replied simply, "Let's do it." Those words would go on to serve as the inspiration for advertiser Dan Wyden's iconic Nike slogan. Jonathan Wayne Nobles stabbed 2 people to death in a drug-fueled rampage. While incarcerated, Nobles got sober, converted to Catholicism, and expressed love for the survivors of his victims and sorrow for his actions. Ron Ross, who survived being stabbed 19 times, watched through glass a few feet away. Nobles told Ron, "I took so much from you. There is nothing I can do to give it back to you. I love you deeply."
He started singing suddenly at the end of that statement, and no one else knew why. But the night before, John's mother, who he hadn't spoken to in years, we finally tracked her down and they spoke on the telephone. And his mother said, "John, I used to love the way that you sang Silent Night when you were a little boy." So Jonathan Nobles, when he died, was singing Silent Night for his mother. And when he got to the line, "Mother and Child," I swear to God, suddenly all of the air blew out of his lungs. It was like one of the loudest sounds I've ever heard. It was like, "Ah!" And his head pitched forward so violently that his heavy plastic prison-issue glasses flew off of his face, bounced off of his chest, and landed on the floor. What I saw didn't look painless, and it didn't look humane. It looked like violence, and it looked like murder.
It is believed that the last meal has its origins in religion. According to the Bible, the night before his execution by crucifixion, Jesus of Nazareth shared a last meal of unleavened bread and wine with his closest supporters. Perhaps this is the reason conservative Christian states in America's South are more likely to be generous with their last meal requests. However, they are also the states that execute the most people.
During the course of the campaign in 1994, I was asked, "Do you support the death penalty?" I said I did, if administered fairly and justly, because I believe it saves lives. I do. I think if it's administered swiftly, justly, and fairly, it saves lives.
It's no nonsense, all business. Coaches never call it the JV and expect an MVP performance. Supercut stylists take more reps than the competition. Honestly, could this many coaches be wrong? Supercuts, real smart hair.
Early payday, fee-free overdrafts, no monthly fee. Chime, the #1 most loved banking app.
Joe Erdy was convicted of the rape and murder of a young girl. He had what 3 separate state psychiatrists described as the mind of a 6-year-old child. Following a short trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to death in the gas chamber. His last meal was a bowl of ice cream. Warden Roy Best would go on to say he probably didn't even know he was about to die. All he did was happily sit and play with the toy train I had given him. In 2011, Joe Erdy was given an unconditional pardon, 72 years after his execution. In 1984, David Wayne Spence was convicted of the rape and torture murders of 3 teenagers in Waco, Texas. The investigation rested largely on statements from convicted felons and a forensic dentist who, after looking at crime scene photographs, linked Spence to bite marks he identified on the bodies. Although the DNA evidence did not match Spence, he was executed on April 3, 1997. Spence requested fried chicken, French fries, tea, coffee, chocolate ice cream, and Coca-Cola for his last meal. In 1986, Spence's mother approached police with a letter she had received from an inmate confessing he had lied at her son's trial. She was raped and murdered in her home 48 hours later. When bite marks were discovered on her body, the same forensic dentist was called in to help convict 2 men. They were both sentenced to life in prison. In 2000, DNA testing exonerated both of them. Barry Lee Fairchild was charged with the kidnap, rape, and murder of a woman in Pulaski County, Arkansas. He maintained his innocence and claimed he had been beaten into a false confession. Despite having the blood type A, while the semen found inside the murdered woman showed her assailant had blood type O, Fairchild was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection. For his last meal, he requested the same menu served to other inmates that day. Fairchild explained his choice simply. In 1994, Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia argued that executing a factually innocent but duly convicted defendant was not unconstitutional. As the perfect example of someone who deserved to die, Scalia pointed to Henry Lee McCollum, who was on death row for the rape and murder of an 11-year-old girl.
So I have to say, in regards to The Last Meal, you managed to make a film that's lighthearted and fun, that's about murder, serial killers, capital punishment. Was that your intention going into it?
Yeah, that was definitely our intention. I think with our filmmaking, we feel like audience is going to respond better if they're entertained, if they're engaged with the content, especially this kind of content. We didn't just want to preach to the converted, I suppose, so to speak. We really wanted to try to reach a broader audience. We try not to sort of take things for granted. And, we've worked on a lot of material and obviously watched a lot of films and been in the cinema where that particular audience is watching a film that they already agree with, they're already on board with. And of course, they respond really positively to the messaging of the picture. But then outside of that bubble, people just don't engage with the content,
Yeah.
And I think that we really wanted to make sure we had a lot of humor and a lot of, the film didn't preach, I guess, that you felt like you were being drawn into the picture and being drawn into the content.
Gacy showed no remorse for his crimes. He wrote in his final statement that killing him would not compensate for the loss of others.
Have people criticized it for that reason, that you're making light of a very serious subject?
I don't know if that's probably been a criticism. I think one thing is that it's not what some people think of as a documentary. They think of a documentary as talking heads, you interview, there's a personal story. You as filmmakers have a personal connection to the story. And that's probably not the way that we make films. And that's not to say that those stories aren't.
I'm gonna stop it there. Let me know what you guys think about this particular story. Like, comment, subscribe. And if you are on death row, what would you choose to eat? Post it down below. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.